Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this evening's episode. Just to share a bit about the weather forecast, it seems like it's going to rain and there might be thunderstorm. But, I have faith that, I can give this episode successfully, But if it's too much, I'll make it part one, so there's nothing too much. Nothing better than, a notepad and room temperature coffee, So, this episode, I thought of doing something interesting. And a metaphor arose to my mind where I wondered that the future of humanity, it's going to eventually acknowledge collective states of mind. And these collective minds, there's this term some people use called a hive mind. And the idea is that there's going to be collective states of the species is going to experience. There's going to be collective states of mind, and we can fathom what they look like. And a metaphor I pretty much found to talk about in this episode is that the beehive is in another dimension. You see, for some years I've been giving these talks, and there's moments where I value myself. There's moments where I value my species. There's moments where I value my world, but then there's moments where when I don't value myself, I stop existing, I would say, as a creature in the world. And so, aside from moments where it's kind of been like an on and off switch, for the meaning of my psyche, I would say that pretty much I have understood that the human evolutionary animalist creature that we are, it has an ability to use its mind in ways where our species is currently unfamiliar with. And I would say that there's a rhythmic component to it. And perhaps the most basic thing human beings need to study at first is how everything has a dualistic property. Duality, a lot of ideas stem from it. For me, when I look at the philosophy of being, all philosophies can be found in four possible contexts. This was my own discovery, I call it ring of the absent heaven, and to simplify it, it's like 0, 1, 2, infinity. These four symbols explain it. So the beehive metaphor comes in that, okay, let's fathom that the species is going to experience some sort of collective mindhood, okay? And Mr.Within is saying, but if this collective mind is another dimension, we're kind of like bees that don't feel like we're in the proper beehive. I think that, to me, when I look at an advanced civilization, it is a masterpiece of nature similar to an anthill or a beehive. Okay? And so the idea of a beehive is in some sense where all the individual bees return to. This is important to consider. It's like the purpose of their being is the beehive. Now, I am saying the beehive gives them great purpose, And so I'm saying, if the human being, we just use this metaphor of a bee and a beehive in another dimension. I'm like, okay, so let's see the human being. The human being is found in one dimension, but could it be that the beehive, or its true home, is in another dimension? And what if this whole time we could have had access to this hidden beehive, but in some sense we have ignored it, right? And so I guess I'll bring out the notepad here because I need to share the possibilities of this. Pretty much this episode is one man's attempt to see potentials of collective states of mind. Pretty much I want to use this episode to brainstorm, the mind hive, the hive mind, either dilemma or strategy. And I have no idea how much wind is being heard by the viewers. Let me just check this for a second. Okay, so the wind is too much. Oh my god. What's the god of wind? It's like the god of all, It's like, let me give my podcast without wind interruption, please. Alright, I'm gonna put the laptop on my, on my knees. Maybe it might reduce the wind. Maybe it won't. Okay, whatever. I just hope the wind isn't. What can I do? I should bring a jacket. Okay, whatever. I just hope the wind isn't. Hold on, guys. Hold on. Guys, I either go with my state of mind right now, or I pause this and let the wind's interruption be fine. And I don't know, I guess people are gonna hear the wind. So my apologies in advance. Successfully distracted myself now to get the ball rolling again. Guys, imagine I become the first podcaster, to give to stream, to live stream, inside of like a tornado. So the idea is to study collective minds. We're starting from this metaphor of, a bee and the beehive idea. people are gonna be listening to this, be like, is Mr. Within talking about being, you know? So, you know, I was talking about the ring of the absent heaven. Pretty much I'm saying that all of reality can be perceived through these dimensions. This is the reality of the void. Reality of the singular. We have reality of the dual. And we have reality of the infinite. I feel that similar to like pretty much here's the idea of human beings are these creatures that have awoken in the middle of nowhere. First there was an unconscious world, just a physical event. And then this unconscious world led to an unconscious self from which the body of a creature arose. Now, when I say the body of a creature arose, it was as if like who knows, you know, how much mindless movement there has been on this planet before there came a mind, right? So pretty much it's another way of saying there was the world and then there emerged the body of a creature. Now what was moving the creature was in actuality its ecosystem, which is another way of saying the world began, you know, sculpting a creature out of itself, you know. Now this creature was being moved by the environment, and the fascination of consciousness, human consciousness, is simply that we could suddenly notice beyond the environment. The whole idea of being a civilized human being is like nature has this savage natural movement, right? And from the savageness and the wilderness of nature, you know, something has arose that has pinpointed a system of order, right? In Greek mythology, the world started from chaos, you know. It started from chaos, and the word cosmos, which we use to explain, it's like another word for the world, the observable, or let's say existential world. The word cosmos means order, right? So pretty much the ability of the human mind is to, in some sense, separate itself from the environment and begin, in some sense, living in accordance to its own world, not to the world outside of itself. This is why freedom of speech is so important. And this is why currently I would say Civilization 1.0, it honors the individual. To be honest, there should be this law that, you know, it's like the fascination of people is based on the technologies that are accessible. Right now, when it comes to the human being, this is getting closer to the hive mind idea, is that, okay, so we have an option of naturally accessing something or unnaturally accessing it, right? If in the future they create some sort of, let's say, computer server where every person can plug in their brain to it or something, that would be an unnatural collective mind, okay? If somebody, let's say you go into a forest, you sit down for 10 to 20 minutes, and for a second you suddenly feel like you have never been an individual, and from the beginning you have been a universe moving. The idea is that there's a natural way to access a collective mind, and people may not believe this is not really something you should believe when it comes to spirituality and mysticism. The biggest issue has been language's replacement of, the unknown experiential truth. Pretty much I'm saying neurotronomy. So we have the concept of a collective mind, or here we have the human, and then we have an individual mind. And this concept of an individual mind, it's actually, we have an individual body and we are a collective mind. But I'll explain this further. And people are different, the whole point of life is that we're not all here to be clones of a truth that only one of us saw. Like, that's nonsense. There's a truth, which is how we happen as it. The truth of an experiential event surpasses the truth of a conceptual narrative. This is so important for people to know, because right now, civilization 1.0 is like, even though people are acting free, let's say in the most modern countries, but nobody is free. Why? Because there's an ideological sort of possession. So let me explain what I mean by this. Just like we had idol worship, think of it this way, that truth was first seen inside an object. Some dude was like, yeah, this, bark, this tree bark is truth. And then somebody was like, no, how dare you make tree bark into a truth? It's like the truth is a subject, right? And so we have had the human being pretty much be like this, the species being moved by the ecosystem, by the silence of the forces of nature, silent forces of nature. And then we've had it in some sense be moved by the stories that creatures have lived through, right? For me, I don't know if, sometimes I have certain shortcomings, and if I would say what one of my biggest weaknesses is that I am always waiting for the unknown to make the first move. And because I wait for the unknown to make the first move, it's like my knowledge isn't released, at least in these talks I release it when, sometimes I feel in my outer life I'm kind of like, it's like I'm a ninja, but I don't know it. It's like, imagine a human being with the superpower of, being able to have never been in there, But anyways, back to this. So we have the idea of the human being. we have the human being. The human being divides. You can pretty much perceive it like a yin yang symbol or whatever. But for now, for the sake of just moving this lecture forth, I'm saying that the human being divides into the individual mind, and it divides into a collective mind. Okay. Now here, I remember I actually corrected myself. Okay, so let's say we have the individual body, right? And when the collective mind moves through the individual body, that's where the appearance of an individual mind arises. But pretty much the whole point is we have these two options. Now, let's say we wanted to know what is a human being and what is, let's say, the individual life. Okay. It's fair to say that the individualism is alive, right? So it's like we're a living individual. And so part of being alive, it's like you require mind and body, right? To be consciously alive, right? So individual life, individual consciousness is pretty much, what does it come down to? It comes down to, I would say, your existential self. It's raining, guys. I'm trying to maneuver here. Another use that t-shirts have is to dry, like, your notepad on a rainy day. That's when you know you're a true writer, Anyways. So for the individual life, we have an existential self, and there is, it just divides to exist, like an existential and an experiential modality. Existence of the individual actually goes to the collective idea of physical existence. That means the idea of the collective needs to be a precondition for something to separate itself from something else to be an individual. In other words, in our consideration of being a physical existence, people are going to be like, Mr.Within, how do I get this natural rain and thunderstorm soundtrack, like background music? Where can I find it online? I'll be like, it's happening live. But I feel like the clouds are passing. Alright, I think it calmed down. I think we should start treating the weather As if it's like, like a wild animal. Pretty much we have the human being. It divides between the categories of the individual and the collective, right? And then it's fair to say here, I'll simplify it. We have the human, then we have the individual and the collective, and in our individual experience we find a body, we find a mind. And just to honor, our ancient past and our, timeless future, we're going to put an idea of soul in there. This is this traditional model. I feel this model is very accurate because rather than saying the term body, mind, soul, you could go kind of like this, like 100% no. The mind is 50-50. And then, just for the sake, it's a combination of both. Pretty much the mind is semi-known, semi-unknown. We come to the soul, and the soul is 100% unknown. In these three dimensions to the individual experience, we will eventually reach a point where we're going to fathom, okay, let's say instead of having an individual being, if we had a collective being, could a collective being have a body, mind, soul? So three possible versions of collective minds can, at least through this model I'm using, the geometry of this moment can be seen. So now we have a question. Could a collective being have a mind, have a body, mind, soul, question mark? And what would this imply? The body is very obvious. It would be as if for example, the example of bees or ants, it could be that it's like there's a collective mind, an invisible collective mind moving the whole thing. Not a visible natural mind, not like fungi or fungus, right? Was it like, there were these scholars of fungus and these scholars of fungus began to realize like the fungus in nature is all like communicating with one another. There's sort of hidden collective systems at work in nature. Really what survival has been was man tapping into these systems. And people don't know this, but everybody who's alive right now, you are all guarded by the future. The future is shielding us from many moments of possible extinction. Why? Because something great is going to happen in the future that nothing now is going to be enough to stop it. Right? When I say something great, I mean imagine like next level beings doing next level things inside a next level world. It's like that's the future of humanity. Right? We have to acknowledge the current dimensions. We have to realize the educational system is like shouting at kids how the past saw the future. And so we have to realize every person is really responsible. Pretty much I am putting this burden on every person. Right? And it's the burden of, wow, you're being a human being inside a human being civilization to serve it. This is it. This is all of my school of thought. I'm like, okay, we're a species. The species requires to do some things, and now we have reached a point where the distrust of civilization 1.0 is just wasting our time. Right? So many people, they wake up every day with a great mindset. I'm going to achieve so many things today. I just see so many YouTube videos on this. And so I'm like, okay, but what if we fixed the context and then we started achieving great things? Right now, I would say, it's like most people, I would say, or the majority of people on this planet, they all are under this assumption, excuse my language, that the species is fucking up its future. Perhaps, there's a reason, the wind howls in the present because of how the future. Really what it is, guys, is that it's a part of our responsibility. It's a bit too soon. I'm a person who I would say with a playful arrogance and ignorance of feeling I was born 400 years too soon. I feel like I should have been born in that era where giant robots require pilots, I've had a dream, guys. It's something I haven't shared, but I've had a dream where most likely I could create a cool story out of it in my science fiction, but I've had this dream where so imagine there's a giant robot, okay? And imagine the spinal cord of this giant robot is an elevator. And I've had that first person point of view of going to the peak point. And it's kind of like a really going on top of, like, imagine a roller coaster going to its peak and then you get to control the roller coaster, like something of that intensity. But anyways, back to this idea. So I'm saying there's the human being, we have an individual category, we have a collective category. In the individual category, we see a visible mind, a visible body. We, through communication, is a way of expressing as an invisible entity. Memory, imagination, they're visible behind our eyes, but technically to the outer realms they're invisible. So pretty much the mind is invisible, and the soul is the poetry of the soul. This is really anybody who says this. It's like if there was a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire kind of game show ABCD answer to like what is the soul, and if one of the answers was inconceivable, that's the only right answer. The soul is inconceivable. Why? Because in some sense it's like the puppeteer of the puppet is the puppeteer of the puppet in time is timeless. So we are timelessly being puppeteered in time, right? But we are the puppeteer, and I will explain what I mean when I say we are the puppeteer. It's another way of saying pretty much the option of psychological godhood or self-godhood or solipsism's, truth. It would be in some sense the person either has to accept that the physical world they're in they did not create, or they have to reject outside creation and only live in domains of their own mind. this is something they don't say, but there is a chance a person can live in a way where in their next lifetime they'll be a fictional entity, right? The mind has such an incredible power, extracting its inspiration from the conscious waking state of the visible outer realms, and in some sense projecting those different inner realms to the capability that when we sleep, our body's just existing in the bed, but our mind inside a dream has created a body and a world for us to move in. So anyways, to this focus point of, okay, if an individual being has in some sense, like being an individual means you have a visible body, an invisible mind, and an inconceivable soul, like that's the equation for individualism, let's say. Now the poetry comes to the notion of a collective body. What is this equal to? A collective mind. What is this equal to? And poetically, a collective soul. What is this equal to? So this means pretty much that the individual mind has access to three potentials of collective experience. The cool thing is we are actually experiencing the collective body. This is the cool thing of being alive, being alive in existence. That's like a different spiritual, divine experience, right? When I say spiritual or divine, because really the divine is the intervention of the unknown in the known, and waking up in an unknown world is equivalent to, like, in some sense, rather than you being in a known state and the miracle moving. The miracle is that there's something here to see here, right? There's the biggest. This is like existence is like it's like the most mysterious miracle. And in some sense, how this world moves is the next. So when it comes to the collective body, we have a species at work. And I believe one of the most important contributions of Darwin, maybe something he didn't speak about it the way I'm going to, but this idea that what unites us is an evolutionary shape. Like, just think about it, like a person goes to a gym and they get a membership card, and now imagine anybody who's existing as a human being, you have a membership card, but that membership card is your DNA, and so we are all existing as a species, right, as a physical species, right? Now this is something we think it's just meaningless. We think it was like random circumstances, it's like chaos led to order. But in reality, this is a source of honor. Pretty much how many human beings where their jobs, for example, think of doctors, think of social workers, think of firemen, police, and even politicians, the righteous ones, I've heard some people say they hate politics, right? But it's like you can't hate politics. You could hate those in it, though, right? It's like you can hate the player, but not the game, actually, because the game goes beyond how. It's like there's different potentials in it. Right now, sure, I mean, it could be like a flawed system, but the idea is as long as there's freedom and there's 1% freedom, let's say in a 99.9% controlled world, as if it's like there's like a domino effect can happen, right? To me, even if like there was a horrific sci-fi scenario where, let's say, I'm gonna attempt this. It's not Halloween, but I'm gonna try it, right? Let's imagine the most like messed up future scenario. Imagine aliens were invading, zombies were attacking, okay, clones were rebelling, and imagine robots were trying to take over, right? And human beings were also at war with each other, and imagine the planet was conscious and angry at everything, and it was like just pure chaos, right? So this would be like oh shit, everybody's mad, it's like the cosmos. That would be an instance where the cosmos is freaking out. So imagine in that scenario there was a small group of people, and in the most chaotic world they started to actually live in accordance to a mighty peaceful algorithm. Right? To live as a human being, people think it's just kind of like we're stranded on a galactic island and it's just survival mode. But in actuality, it's like these are dimensions where after the physiological mountain is climbed, you discover a psychological mountain. And after you climb the psychological mountain, it's pretty much you have observed the dualistic nature of the visible and the invisible. So technically you notice that how you know the invisible and visible are happening or being is because they're simultaneously existing. And so when the human conscious mind steps out of a dualism, that is when there's a strange freedom. But that freedom is very, it's like, enlightenment is like this hilarious, view where it's as if it's like a questioner, was pure and humble and, let's say, worthy enough, and suddenly, the divine revealed itself, and it was so simple that it's like no complexity could attach to it. It's another way of saying, in the middle of the questioner or the truth seeker looking for truth, suddenly the truth seeker archetype dissolves. Right? It's like somebody looking for a treasure, then they realize the treasure is not physical. Imagine, back in the day there was like this ancient yogi, and this person came and told him, it's like, I want to get enlightened in the visible, I want to get enlightened in the visible dimension, right? And the ancient yogi was like, buddy, you're still dealing with the visible dimension. Have you not noticed your mind is not an object and it is actually a force? When Yoda says, I don't know if it's Yoda or whatever, but where there's this sentence in Star Wars where some person says the Force is strong in this one or something like that. It's like the hilarious thing is, it's like that it's all Force, We are a living force, We are a life force. We are, the revolution of, an animate life in a meaningless So in regards to the collective physical, collective body of the species, I'll bring my attention back to this. You know, just for us to realize that, okay, where's my pen? So, a physical species, it's pretty much biochemical rhythmic, existence. Rhythmic body, or here, let's say mechanism. And when I say mechanism, guys, anything that is serving a sort of function, right? Pretty much, when we look at the world, there's stuff that isn't moving, and there's stuff that's moving, and all of knowledge is about how is stuff moving. Right, and so all of knowledge is in some sense on the thin ice where the depths of the unknown realm remain. Right now, we are in a world that pretty much just creatures on a rock started naming things. They named themselves and they named the world, and they thought that was knowledge, not realizing that we're multidimensional experiencers of the realm. Okay guys, I don't see clouds in the sky. I just saw lightning, but I don't see clouds in the sky. Biochemical, rhythmic, here, mechanistic, temporary. Pretty much it would be like herd movement. This is our as close as, like, I would say physical. The physical species, pretty much, it's like, imagine like that picture of like a group of fish shaped like a bigger fish and trying to scare away a shark. The idea is that right now we haven't experienced it yet, but this will be the next great renaissance of human history, where I would say we suddenly see 8 billion human beings, 8 billion different DNAs, 8 billion private harbors of inner universe. consciousness. We will begin to see just like a great symphony. Oh my God. Just a second, guys. I gotta just hold on. I'll be back. Okay. Alright guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. But honestly, like, I can't apologize for the wind. Like, that's the wind's fault, you know. But okay, so pretty much collective body, this is what I see. So if we were to consider in a visible, physical way, what would a sort of collective being or collective mind probability look like? It would just be like 8 billion human beings synchronized to a greater inner rhythm of their own life. And to me, I have been blessed in this life to discover, I think, the most important idea ever. I am making that claim, right? I'm that guy making this incredibly bold claim to not just people now, not to just people who have been, but to all the unborn children of the future generations. And I am saying, when it comes to the outer physical life, all arguments lead to the advanced civilization. That is the greatest thing 8 billion creatures can do, and that knowing of the possibility is going to activate a rhythm. So pretty much how an advanced civilization, you know, let's say somebody who had before this life noticed this algorithm, pretty much it's like, just like imagine there's a auditorium filled with people, and in this auditorium filled with people, right, people are waiting, and first they see a conductor going. Pretty much, guys, imagine we're sitting in that theater, the conductor comes in, sits silently cross-legged, you know, in the center, you know, the platform, and then suddenly we see one musician come in, right? And then we see, like, the moment that one musician comes in, the conductor stands up and starts playing. Starts moving the conductor stick, and so there's one person who's playing an instrument. Now imagine in this concert that the musicians keep being added, more and more musicians come, and they see the type of great grand melody, you know, the grand symphony that they can be a part of. You know, it's pretty much the best thing we can do out in the physical world, to build a system so advanced that our attention can go towards the truth beyond the simulated life. The winds of evolution fearlessly move us on. People don't know this, but the forces of nature, a person's mind can hold the world in such a way where it's as if, nature is their ally, or better yet, their close friend. There is a spirit to every moment. Even right now, me talking, it's like, why should the periodic table in this corner of the universe, be organized in such a way where, eyes are noticing, how the mind is present. Like the purpose of the consciousness of the visible is to discover the invisible. And we are living in the invisible in the sense that we are subjects that are moving objects. So easily we claim ourselves to be human beings, yet we don't know. You see the power of mysticism, guys. Mysticism is another way of saying at the edge of the known world, the unknown smiles. So, pretty much, symphony of an advanced civilization. That would be how culture will evolve. Pretty much, we're going to see way more advanced human beings, and civilization, the ignorance of the ego, is going to pretty much the attention that is going to self-preservation is going to go to self-preservation, but through collective preservation, right? So it's as if we want to. It's like the idea is only the advanced can build an advanced civilization, right? But the advance is not like somebody who's like Shakespeare says. Some people are born great, some people achieve greatness, some people have greatness thrust upon them. See, so it's as if it's not something you have, but it's something that can activate. So it's another way of saying every person who's alive right now, hidden in the collective unconscious, the world can activate. And how can I tell you? It's like there's an unknown way that your most advanced state of being can activate. It's like in the unknown. It's like we don't see it, but it's there. The beehive is there, but it's not in. It's beyond. I would say the invisible domain. All of human life seems to be centered around the concept of control. But really what death is, or, it is in some sense reaching a state where there's no control, right? It's as if, like, it's like a multidimensional place. We are occupied by a few of its dimensions. That's the problem with that. So, pretty much I've shared the collective body type, the collective body vision of a sort of collectivity where it's pretty much synchronized movement. And you can say when a species loves itself, it's another way of saying the species is instantaneously trusting itself. And if there's any genius ideas hidden in our species, they will instantly activate. The idea is that the future is too smart not to be benevolent. It's as if the great chess piece that the human species can play going into the future would be to claim itself, in some sense, the most advanced that it knows of, right? What I'm trying to say is that when I say an advanced civilization, it's built by advanced beings. The advanced beings, I term it the advanced communicators. And the idea of to be an advanced communicator is another way of saying you realize you're the most advanced communication of the universal sect. Okay, what I mean by this is that as much as we have a relationship with the planet which we've named, and we're like, the guy in mine's hugging me right now. But it's like more than that. There's a universal occurrence here. And the idea is, I have already decided this, where I'm living as a universal being. That means to me, as much as the idea, my name, my personality, my memories that configure my identity, like, regardless of all these, to me, it's like, it's like we have one lifetime. You can choose to identify with, a chunk of the earth. You can choose to identify with the whole earth, become a planetary being. You can choose to identify with the galaxy, let's say, and you become, in some sense, a galactic being. Like, that's your identification system. Philosophically, just going to the concept of the galaxy, right? And you can even go beyond that, right? For me, when I was younger, spirituality seemed like an invisible truth for a visible being, but right now it has turned into, for me, it has turned into the inconceivable truth. Excuse me, the inconceivable truth of an invisible being. Because if the mind isn't an object, what is it doing here, right? And the only way we can discriminate, it's like something has to move in the middle of nowhere for it to turn into now here. Like, that's it. We are, on some level, you could choose to identify yourself with, let's say, with the elemental, with the periodic table, but we can also identify with movement. I can even identify with shape. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's as if a person can identify with color even, right? It's as if, like, it's like that rock isn't made of particles, it's made of gray. It's just the color gray in 3D space. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we can cherry pick which initial dimension we put into the causal view of our perception, right? But the idea is, at least where I have reached, is that we have for too long chased after truth, where it's as if, like, truth is fed up, and those chasing truth is fed up. Do you know what I mean? Both sides are fed up, with this game of, like, truth. Right? So what has happened is that there's two options, where either we say there's no truth, this is the wrong answer, I find, or we say we are already being the truth. Just take that in, right? It's as if the person has to ask themselves, how much energy does it take for me to think I'm an inefficient being, and how much energy does it take for me to think I'm an efficient being? And it takes the same amount of energy. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like reality for the mind. It's like the moment they say you have free will, it's another way of saying you control the measuring tape of your realm. And what imagination is actually how, I would say, we can see with our eyes closed. Therefore suggesting it's like there's another layer to the onion of, like, the here and now. Life is fascinating, guys, because there's something to do. So anyways, so far I've given the prime example of the collective physical possibility, just synchronized movement. I'll give you another kind of sci-fi futuristic angle. Imagine like 10 people connect let's say there's 10 lonely people, and then these 10 lonely people connect their minds to like one server, right? It would technically, a sort of cyberspace envisionment of a sort of physical collectivity would be another way of saying like one mind, multiple bodies, which is another way of saying like let's say if 10 people connected their minds to like this, let's say, futuristic cyberspace server, and they were all equivalently like an administrator of that server, it would be another way where sequentially they would choose which body to live in. So it would be this, let's say 10 people have connected again their mind to this hive mind scenario, mini hive mind, and due to that, it would be of saying like 5 each. It's like, excuse me, those 10 people can simultaneously experience themselves in all of their bodies, each other's bodies. So it would be another way of saying 10 conscious personalities moving one body, right? It would be like a next level paradigm of just like, you know, ways that the psychology can fragment, really. But that's again a physical view. Now we come to the collective mind, and the collective mind, something interesting has happened here, and I would say it is as fascinating as a sort of ancient alien contact. Okay. And just to make it clear, my personal view on metaphysics and divinity is that I don't see, I would say it's all just, all of theosophy to me is like the future self, right? So for me, how would I say it? It's like if some spiritual person thought they had guardian angels, I am considering that it's my future self. That what is really beyond time is a timeless possibility, and what if that timeless possibility was activated before we were manifest? So when it comes to a collective mind, the mind is expression and reception. So technically a collective mind would be it would be pretty much it would be the beehive in another dimension. So if the collective for the example of the collective body that it's happening in the visible dimension, let's say the collective mind is how there is a field of activity. So this is where I would say we begin identifying, because what is invisible? Space, right? Space is invisible. It's like, what's the color of space? Like, nobody's been able to figure this out, you know? Because we're defining it based on the absence of phenomena. We're actually still object worshippers when it comes to truth of, you know, the multidimensionality of life. For the collective mind, we can't ignore language. Language 100% has a role. So the evolution of language, and the idea is going to be we are a self, like in a world, and we're speaking, right? It's as if there's a distance between the initial duality where we're conceptualizing ourselves as an entity through, right? So it's as if right now, how am I not being the world because I'm considering myself separate from it, okay? So I am saying from the perspective of an entity that is a self in a world, the self and the world are separate, right? The evolution of language is going to be in making this gap, this distance between the self and the world. In some sense, it's going to be shortening it. So I will make a prediction that in the advancement of civilization, we're going to be able to, like I've envisioned it in my inner realms, there's going to be these suits in the future, and the earth is going to become a very quiet place. Why? Because people can not only instantaneously pass on their thoughts to another, that means it's like it renders speech unnecessary. Pretty much our mouths would go back to just eating food. Like that would be their purpose, Maybe I don't want to say we can't speak, but the idea I'm saying is that we're going to be able to throw our thoughts into others, like literally, you know. So it would be as if, like, imagine, somebody had a memory, they would just, and they had this suit on, and imagine that the suit allowed them to suddenly project a hologram golden cube, and that hologram golden cube held their memory, and they threw that light hologram cube into somebody else's suit, and they instantly knew what the person wanted to communicate before even needing to say anything. Right? The idea I'm saying is that communication is the privilege between a sort of known and unknown dimension. As the knowledge speeds up, in some sense, its identification with the unknown will shift as well. So, when it comes to the collective mind, by the way, for the physical species, this would be the collective movements. But for the collective mind, aside from language, cyberspace arises from binary language. So we could say that technology is a language, or if language is a technology, then technologies are also language. It's as if all mechanisms are actually speaking a hidden language of animate manifestation, like animating it. Like when something happens, it's like it's revealing what it is to some people. So, excuse me. Pretty much cyberspace fits into this. Cyberspace equals cyber life. It pretty much means the life of the mind of the species. Now, in the subtitle, I've written something which I should talk about. I've written the mind's ego vision. The concept of ego vision is something where, it has a natural origin and it has a cultural origin. Its cultural origin, you could say, like from the video game Assassin's Creed, the main character had something called ego vision, and he could pretty much see things, from an aerial view. When I say the mind's ego vision, I want to use the metaphor of an actual eagle, and an eagle has an ability to be on a branch, right? And then the eagle has an ability to fly into the sky and see the whole forest and reselect what branch it wants to go on, right? Now, this reselection, this aerial view notion of the ego vision, when I say we are, the beehive is in another dimension for the bee. It's like that eagle vision is the beehive. It's another way of where I'm saying there is a state that every person can access to, that before they identify with anything, they are viewing the whole moment. It's as if before you do anything, whoever you are listening to me, you're actually being your whole moment, and the potential of what could become your divinity is just what is your moment. This is something that people don't say. It's like to wonder about what the moment is. Like, that's the secret. pretty much, let's say a soccer team or a football team is like that's a sort of physical, visible kind of collective mind, collective effort. And then when it comes to an invisible dimension, it's pretty much like the interlinking of the imagination of the species. Pretty much we are a creature that lives in simulating lives for itself. That's exactly what we've been doing, ever since physical life became an object, evolved into a subject to itself. It's like pretty much we're like, okay, like I'll give you an example of how many different lives a person has right now. We have our physical life, our biological life. Then we have our subjective life, right? Our imagination, memory, mind, and whatever, right? And then we have a cyber life. Imagine the future children are going to be living inside computers, before they're born, consciously to themselves in that way. So we're going to have, there's a cyber life, and imagine there is a life that, independent of all the others, is just a person's geometric life. It's like what sin can a geometrical entity commit, It's like what emotion can we connect to the shape of a world, And honestly, cyberspace is another way of saying it's the invisible life of our species. We're all being the pioneers of it. We are building a cyber hive mind by moving the attention of our natural biological existence towards a technological domain. It's like there may come a time in history where Plato thought about, like, Socrates, spoke about Socrates talking about the philosopher king. Imagine the future if it just becomes a purely technocracy or something. There's going to be like the programmer king. This whole time in the psychological kind of pancake flipping game of civilization, from chaotic and ordered beings just in combat, it's like, imagine, lifetimes after lifetime, chaos breaks order, order fixes chaos, chaos breaks order, order fixes chaos. Eventually, something is going to recognize it has seen so much of this endless chaos and order that the point of life cannot be infinity. It's another way of saying infinity is like realizing that the ending doesn't exist. So the only thing left is to reverse engineer to the beginning. That means imagine if right now everybody was an immortal being, like there was no such thing as death, everybody just lived on, and overpopulation wasn't a problem because we had interstellar cities and whatnot, sky cities. This is my vision of Civ 2.0. I'm that person, and maybe in history in 2022 is actually trying to, walk to a future where we build that. It's like probably in the future I'll create an episode how to build a sky city. I've really thought about this idea. But anyways, it would be like the body would become unnecessary and the mind's life would be active, where it would be like a consideration of like, we think when we wake up we stop dreaming, but actually imagine the dreaming is happening 24/7. What people are called, somebody imagining something throughout the day, imagine that's like the same ability of the mind in the dreaming state taking place in the conscious waking state. It's hilarious because it's like the mind is dreaming in reality. It's like truth is dreaming, it's untrue, and civilizations rise and fall of freaking out over the ultimate ethics. For me, it's the purpose of the imagination is to access information that we don't just access from the senses. The idea of the mind is the life of another dimension to the human intelligence. Albert Einstein has this quote where he says, knowledge takes you from A to B, but imagination takes you everywhere, or something in those lines. The reason Albert Einstein was saying, not because he had theorized, he had theorized general relativity and special relativity. Einstein's fame pretty much began with two epic essays. I think it's because Einstein says that because he knew that when we go from A to B, it's sequential and its framework is limited to time, and the value of the past before the present went into the future. But Einstein realized that imagination is out of nowhere something happening. This is why imagination can go everywhere, because it's an instantaneous activation, right? Imagination, pretty much there's two ways. Either you don't do anything and your mind automatically tunes into a rhythm, right? So it's like you either wait for the unknown to move, or the other way is that you try to seek the most advanced state, and you're trying to accelerate the moment to a point where I would say it's like pretty much after you have seen the newest thing, then you're left to exploring it, and then the divinity becomes a conscious activation, right? Death is like, let's say, the unconscious activation of divinity. If from the beginning there was a sort of unknown, there was a sort of will of mind to the unknown, And so we finally come to the third view, the collective soul. Now, religion calls this God, okay? And somebody once said a way to see the difference between polytheistic and monotheistic traditions is in the statement that a polytheistic tradition is like the statement everything is God's, G-O-D-S, and then monotheistic tradition would be everything is God, G-O-D, comma, S. Everything is God's. That means everything belongs to the inconceivable creator in monotheistic traditions, or Abrahamic viewpoints, right? One of the most important things of how religious ideological systems are going to move into the future is that we have to begin treating everything, the major idea of all religious ideological systems being the salvation of the human being, right? And the idea of salvation is the concept of paradise, okay? And the concept of paradise is another way of saying like rather than after. But okay, let's say if the idea of paradise is after this life we go to paradise, the practice should be that in some sense we are building paradise on earth, but it's not us building it, it's the will of the realm. I am telling you, there's things happening on this planet that have nothing to do with human psychology, and at best we're gonna feel like, you know, on the shoulder of giants. At least we notice the giant is moving. You know, that's the so far this is what it is, you know. This would be the concept of the collective soul in a religious view God, and now let's say we said secular, in a secular society. The collective soul, to me, it would be here, I'll call it the advanced humanity. It's a safe way of talking about it. The idea is that if from the religious tradition you're just here to follow what God said, like that's a way you can function in a lifetime, and then there's another view where if the concept of God wasn't there, it would be as if we are evolutionary creatures, we are explorers. And here I would say the concept of God, the collective soul, would be the ultimate, there we go, the ultimate exploration. That means just like how, let's say, we have religious preachers, you know, in a religious format, like in churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, like, you know, just like we have preachers. Imagine the secular society, you know, realized why I'm talking about the advanced civilization as not just the greatest ethos of human beings, but as the greatest mythos. It would be as if human beings attempting something of a mythological level. Do you know? It's as if the advanced civilization would be so fascinating that it's like all the ancient gods are going to be like on their clouds being like, yo, what are these human beings doing? This is so next level. You know, imagine, you know, human beings did something that all possible, probable, potential, greater dimensions viewing us were like, no way. No way the human species decided to advance itself. Like, people are like, I'll tell you, the whole universal sector is going to freak out because it's like a gifted species. Imagine there's hilariously like extraterrestrials in greater dimensions and they've placed bets, you know. Or imagine the gods, they've placed bets on, like, you know, is the human species going, it's like, how long is it going to take for the human species to advance? It's like, you know, 4.5 billion years, you know, 9 billion years, like, how long is it going to take, right? And imagine in 2022 when we decide to be like, okay, what's the purpose of life? There's something here. What's the purpose of something here? To go somewhere. What's the purpose of going somewhere? To see where you can go. This is, you can say, like a crack. Pretty much the poet Rumi says there's a secret freedom, you know, inside a crack you can barely see. Something of those things. That means in the physical, nihilistic human anguish, a counterattack of mankind is to discover, to be honest enough to be like, okay, the species is playing a massive language game, and now it has to coordinate, it has to bring forth a greater language game. It's pretty much the idea is, it's like I'm a human being, I've opened my eyes, and for me, ideological systems, like they are giants. Like for example, religions, to me, they're technically giants, you know, and a religious person is on the shoulder of that giant, right? So for me, I was like, okay, in a world of giants, it's like, what is the greatest strategy? And I realized we need to create a giant greater than all these giants, right? To in some sense bring forth a vision for the species that surpasses any ideology, so we never get entrapped by the language of the past when the future's waiting. The idea is not to fight the past, because then you remain in the past, you know. For me, I have this attitude, I would recommend it to people, but at the same time, you know, everybody's different, even though I recommend it or not. Pretty much I have this attitude that anytime I see the past is trying to in certain dimensions of my life, not all dimensions of my life, but there's been certain moments where I don't touch the past. Imagine somebody, you know, suddenly they have this thought and they refuse to identify with that thought of their mind in that moment, right? Pretty much honor in the inner realms is the ability to recognize how your attention truly deserves to move. For me, I want to see the most advanced humanity, and I want to see what it would look like. And in my inner realms, let's say in the skies of imagination, I have envisioned it. But I will tell you, to see it, how the existence will follow up the inner experiences is something completely different. You know, it's on another level. So when it comes to the collective soul, let's say the ultimate exploration, or, you know, let's say the super ultimate advanced state. It's like the person's like, you know, what kind of enlightenment did you attain? It's like an incredible, you know, incredibly advanced, you know, enlightenment. I'm just saying, you know, human beings have to just for a moment be like, what are we living for, though, you know? And then they realize this is why we have minds. The mind is here to fill out the space in the void, right? But it's as if somebody's like, what is freedom? Freedom is the expression of intelligence in space. That's it. And it's recognition of the space. That's a sort of inner freedom. For me, if somebody was like Mr.Within, okay, so how did you, let's say, transcend the invisible towards the inconceivable, right? I would say I realized that my mind has never been a shape for me to identify as. So when I've realized this, my relationship to imagination is just like I'm someone being in the moment, I'm just here, and then it automatically comes without effort. Do you know, it's like sometimes I feel when I'm giving these talks, I'm like the brain has been an antenna this whole time, and I've just found a way to tune the antenna, you know? The most advanced state here, I'll end this. This to me is the most beautiful thing ever. I think, you know, for me, the idea of advancement is one of the most purest divine ideas, you know. It's like the meaning of life. It's as if, like, imagine the potential energy in the void was given a command, and it was as if, like, manifest, and all of existence began taking shape, as if it was the instruction of a universal event. The weather has cleared, ladies and gentlemen. This is my knees don't need to overheat anymore. So if people look at the screen, what I'm pretty much trying to say is that the collective soul, it can be God, it could be advanced, let's say the advanced in any category. To me, anything a person does, like they have to consider, just like there's different angles to look at an object, there's also different ways you can look at a subject. Sometimes emotions may, entrance us and never changing or wondering about if a subject it looks looking like something else in another way, but the idea is pretty much that if it's like, even from a religious angle, monotheistic religious angle, it's as if God has given you intelligence for a reason beyond our reason. So the idea is for the human being to use the living, to use the lifetime. It's as if wield your lifetime in whatever way you it's like whatever kind of poetically, philosophical swordsman and avoid you are, wherever you are listening to me. It's as if like there's a style to how intelligence animates, and the decision of what controls this, it's all about the context you have. Ability is based on context shift, and if a person doesn't have the ability to, in inner realms, fathom it, they need the experience of failure, for example, to shift. We can have this view that we've been with the same character in the same story of our life every day, or we could have this view that we are this invisible attention moving through many simulations of self. Every day we wake up, it's like a new self, and in a new way, in the same way. Pretty much what I'm saying is, when it comes to the experiential dimension of human intelligence, it's simulated. When it comes to the existential dimension, it's changing slower than how our minds are moving. It's like our minds are moving faster than our bodies. For me, a collective soul, it technically, it would be the evolution of the advanced civilization. This is some next level handwriting. Now, another way of it is a sort of ideological. Pretty much, here's the idea. If the collective mind and the collective body that I was speaking about earlier are seen in the realm of duality. Okay, so I'll write here collective mind, collective body. It would be as if in the ponderings, or if we were to wonder about how do I say it? If we were to wonder about like the inconceivable way everything is collective, right? It would be as if there's three modes. I would say three modes of a collective soul, right? One is zero, which I am saying this is how space is life. It's like that's pretty much the resolution of the mystery of consciousness. And then, so we have zero, we have, let's say zero, we have two, and then we have one, okay? In one, it's I would say it also fits into the collective mind, but pretty much it's as if like everything is alive. Space is alive. This would be like nothing is alive. For this, it would be chaos and order. Or the yin-yang symbol is alive. Confucius is probably like, if you could hear me now, you'd be like, you're taking it too far, man. You're taking it too far. Chaos and order is alive. And then we come to the infinite dimension, and this is the evolution of human psychology after duality, and most likely, if there's a parallel possibility in human history where immortal technologies come about. But it's pretty much the idea of the effort being unlimited. So anything where there's an unlimited effort in it and there's a shape, if that effort is conscious, it would like to, it wants to hold on to its plane of existence. So it would be another way of saying like an immortal being would have technically an infinite being's psychology, would have a psychology of an infinite being, right? Or let's say in cyberspace there was some sort of ability to experience yourself as like the infinite copy-paste pressing of the button of like reality, So that means somebody goes into cyberspace and they act like a god that can build worlds, infinite worlds or something. So there's that kind of sort of relationship with infinity. But I'll say that pretty much what infinity means, right, is that truth never stops. That's pretty much what infinity means. And if there's any questions or thoughts people want to share, the chat section is alive. Pretty much the thing about infinite psychology, it's like the opposite of man. My mind found a capability, and I think all of our minds have this capability. I'm just maybe like playing around with it more than the average person. Infinity is another way of saying that the opposite of the finite, right? It would technically mean that if there is no death, there is no time-based value system. If there's no time-based value system, everything would be just go towards a limitless point. And it would eventually get boring. That means for how long can an immortal being just infinitely experience change? Eventually, the absence of truth becomes a sort of freedom from a sort of simulation as well. Right? I'm not saying that truth doesn't exist. I'm saying that, first of all, this world to me is alive. The whole thing is alive. And not just because the mind is the awareness of the whole moment. But I'm saying that it's like life is alive and it moves in ways where just as a organism on a rock, on a pebble and a light beam, why should there be anything moving at all? An advanced civilization, it begins with an incredible gratefulness of its possibility. Right? For me, it's as if like this whole time the species has allowed its emotions to blindfold from a destiny, where for the first time, the human kingdom, and poetically we go towards the emperor of the stars. It would be this idea that it's as if the whole galaxy has an honor for the universe. That means imagine like hilariously a sci-fi setting where aliens came to invade, and then suddenly the aliens realize in honor of the living universe they cannot disturb. It's like the microcosm, it has many relationships with the macro, right? With the macrocosm, but in reality they are the personification of the human entity. Dear viewers, have we not all been unknown watchers in the mirror? The supremacy of the inconceivable is that it's timeless. Just like Plato says, time is the moving image of eternity. Time is the moving image of eternity. As if like we are living in one side of the coin where there's time, and then there's another side, timeless. It's as if we're timelessly being, through a timeless being, we are doing things in time, and it's remarkable. Just the fact that every person's alive, it's as if we have front row seats to the possibility of a human existence. We are members of a species that awakened, was the first species to awaken from the slumber of unconsciousness. Civilization is a masterpiece is the potential of a masterpiece. Right now the world that has been left for us in 2022 we're living, I consider this as civilization 1.0 being like our ancestors' best try, right? That means, let's say right now, let's say trillionaires could solve, let's say some world problems or something, and let's say they're not, okay? It would be suddenly this view, or let's say even we go from a philosophical route. It's as if we say that it's as if mathematical abstraction can be placed. Imagine like a world where every person went and checked their bank account and the number was just the infinity symbol. Imagine an era where everybody had infinite money. Okay. Imagine that world. It would be a world where it's as if its self-limitation would be just something that is kept. The idea is that the species is intelligent enough to navigate in a way where it at first starts building so many backup systems that we reduce the percentage of failure, and then the innovation begins. Right? For me, I'm like, it's as if it's literally like we have to rebuild the kingdom of humanity with the honor of its universal position. That's what the idea of the advanced civilization stands for. It's going to be the greatest work of art of the cosmos. It would be the masterpiece of species. It's as if why have been civilizations rising and falling this whole time for there to be one lucky civilization that through the recognition of its mortality fathomed about immortality and came into this conclusion. In some sense, the species either closes its eyes or it does not go gentle into that good night. It's as if the species, we're actually, best way to define it also is we're a performer species, because the manifestation as an organism is a temporary performance. So technically it's as if we're 8 billion performers, and now the issue is we have not found the same stage. Cyberspace into the internet has helped, but the idea is that it's like the world is an equivalent empty space for inefficient archetypes, and now the idea is are we going to get to see, you know, an advanced humanity's emergence through every person just wondering what would a more advanced moment be, right? To me that has like the same fascination of like some of an explorer of an unknown world, you know? So it would be as if the collective, so this was what I was talking about before when it comes to the concept of the collective soul. Pretty much these three avenues open up, right? Technically, you know, these four states are there for each, but I'm saying pretty much after we have completed our dualistic karma, or let's say karma is a dualism itself, but I'm saying, let's say after our life in duality is finished, and let's say we, before even this life, had experiences life as the world, where it's like we were nothing before we could be everything, right? And let's say we did experience everything. The future reached such a collective state that the idea of an individual human being would be silly, because it's as if like energy never had a face. Like it could go to that level. I think that's probably like one of those statements, you know, energy doesn't have a face. Then the person looks in the mirror, it's like, then what am I looking at right now? Sorry guys, I'm looking for something I can't find. Hold on. Excuse me. So, where was I going with this? Pretty much once these four dimensions are acknowledged, imagine right now we had a definition for the most advanced being, and the most advanced being was content, was conscious and content of the void, was conscious and content of the singular and everything, was conscious and content of duality. That means they had to, you know, live enough through chaos and order. And imagine they had also, in some sense, lived as an infinite being. Because it's like it's like transcendence is really what the psychology of an immortal is a term, the psychology of an immortal being would use. You know, evolution is the psychology of immortal. Imagine you're content with all types of infinity, geometric, existential, experiential, through any story. That means your mind had an ability to see the infinity in the finite. Any archetype could be absolutized and suddenly also made empty and void. And so, after, let's say, the collective human consciousness has conquered the void, the singular, the dual, and the infinite, pretty much we reach a point where, in my book, I've called it advancement beyond the language threshold, which means that we're going to reach a point where we're not going to be a concept anymore. It would be as if we're not going to be a creature, an object, or a subject. So technically you can say everything returned to God, or in some sense, it's like truth had never left its ultimate state. That in this moment, truth is being truth before any idea needs to be on it. It's as if existence is existing. And every experience is like a wave in this ocean, right? There's a YouTube channel called Gems of Wisdom. If people look that up, they're going to find 3 books, but I'll say 2 of them. You're going to find the Ashtavakra Gita and the Avadhuta Gita audiobook. And those are books which are taking the attention of the viewer towards the inconceivable. And the inconceivable is another way of saying we thought we were a known entity, but the knowledge was limited to the thought. And so when we realize our attention is present prior to the coming and goings of thoughts, we realize we have not been thoughts. So it's like a reversion of the attitude of the whole moment back into a moment where if you saw something unknown happen in front of you, like how fascinated would you be? Now imagine you realize there's something unknown happening as you internally is happening, right? And that is fascinating, right? And inevitably it'll reach a point where it accelerates to a point where it's another way of saying an advanced civilization is advancing so fast that it goes faster than the speed of light and poetically becomes, invisible. That means an advanced civilization instantaneously advancing. That means there would be no time for conception to remember a shape. Pretty much it seems like the destiny of conscious organisms is to lift off, from the platform of manifestation, and at the end of I should say the end of ends, but I would say the future I see that we will have matured as a species to such a degree that we will fear nothing. Nothing is to be feared by the future. They see beyond it. They see too much beyond it. The future is another way of saying, the greatest chapters of history. Right? The idea of the collective soul is just how an unconditional truth is being prior to a conditional. It's like the ultimate freedom being instantaneous. For me, I have this view that the human species, imagine 8 billion, instead of the movie Castaway where it was one guy, imagine 8 billion creatures are cast away on this rock in the middle of, let's say, unknown cosmic waters, Okay. And so we're on this island, let's say called Earth, in the universe. And now what do we do on this island, right? We have, what do you call that? I want to say Stockholm Syndrome, but I want to say it's like we have identified with the island first, right? And to me, the great revolution of minds in the future is when we're going to realize that which pilots as consciousness in the outer realms, it has the liberation of its inner realms. The most advanced beings to me, they would be like equivalent to like, secular angels. I mean, pretty much doctors are like secular angels, but I'll say like the bees that found the beehive in another dimension. It's like these 8 billion creatures realize there's a collective state of being through nature. And when it comes to the attitude of the mind, the concept of the invisible other for the mind, or the invisible mind, is like the logos. In contrast, the visible mind being the freedom. It's pretty much like, either we move the moment, or the moment moves us, or something moves us, to move the moment. It's like their variations. So I would say that when I think I'll sum up this episode by saying, through the mind's ego vision, it's like the species has an ability to access an internally collective state of being. Okay? And what I mean by this is that imagine 8 billion human beings concluded that the most advanced activity of all of them would lead to the most advanced scenario. That's it. When history embraces the advanced civilization algorithm, I'm telling you, it's unavoidable. I'm just privileged to make it be. The early bird, talks about it, but there's going to come more and more and more people who are going to see that we're going to get bored of our suffering. The whole species is going to get bored of its suffering, and it's going to flip towards its most advanced state, because what else can you do? For how long are we defined by change? It's like at some point to be defined. And that's the effort of the species and the world. The freedom to realize if there's greater freedom. And the freedom to realize that. It's as if, why shouldn't we all be the most advanced beings in the universe? It's like, what harm can come from this view, because it lives as a potential. It's like saying, just like there's a potential for a person to be good, a potential for them to be evil, similarly there's a potential for them to be advanced. It's pretty much like the forces right now in civilization 1.0, it's like more than 50% inefficiency. When the balance is restored, 50% inefficient, 50% efficient, then there's a sort of how would I say it, an identification. I'll say it this way, it's pretty much if we can build a world where the future can be honored by we have succeeded. That means a lot of people judge themselves based on their past. How many people judge themselves based on their future? It's like, why not let the future identify you? We take the past and identify with it. It's like we're identifying with one side of the coin. But what would the future of a species look like? And why have we not yet considered the most advanced strategy? We're literally like a species is in the battle of manifestation in time against the void. right? It's as if we're here now, and that the energy can be used. This grand symphony of all the musicians, 8 billion musicians, master musicians here playing your tunes. Anyways, guys, I'll read this quote from Padmasambhava and I'll end this off. If upon looking outwards, towards the external expanse of the sky, there are no projections emanated by the mind, and if on looking inwards at one's own mind there is no projectionist who projects thoughts by thinking them, then one's own mind, completely free from conceptual projections, will become luminously clear. Clarity of the presence of life before the personality can turn it into a story. You know, it's as if be free before you could not be. Thanks for listening, guys. Much blessings. And I'll say that last line again. Be free. Or let me see how I can say it. Be free before you need to be. That's the ability of just every person's mind. It's like there's hidden films behind all of our eyes, and it's like civilization is the place to play these films. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Let us wonder if there's a collective beehive and another dimensional collective possible access to all information. It's like, what if when Plato says time is the image of eternity, what if in that eternity there is access to intelligence? What if eternity is intelligent? Perhaps the destiny of consciousness is the, remembrance of the intelligence of eternity. Anyways, much blessings and namaste.